That was a great interview, Jeff. Now finally, where can I find your website?
I don't have a website.
What?
I just never got around to making one.
You know what? I can't take you seriously with an attitude like that. I am extremely disappointed in you. To not have a website is irresponsible, lazy, you lack ambition. I mean, where's the vision?
Don't be like Jeff. Be responsible. Get out there and shine with a beautiful website by Web Orchard, where they will take care of all of your website needs. Go to theweborchard.com right now and get a beautiful website you deserve.
You know what? Get out.
Hi guys, and welcome to episode 2 of season Charlie of the Shrewsbury Biscuit. And things are going really well so far. There's been no problems and no hitches. Actually, that's not quite true. So I didn't realise how intense the work was going to be in my new job for the night shift. So yeah, the last season was a few days late with release, so we released it on Thursday rather than the Monday. Really sorry about that. But at least the audio was absolutely fine. There was no problems with that. That's not true either, because for some strange reason Spotify repeated my intro and left a 3.5 minute intro turned into a 7. I don't know why that happened. I edited it in the right way, but at least the episode came out well. It's actually true, that one. It really did come out well with Charlie Adlard. Well received. People really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for everybody that listened to it. If you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen to it. Thank you to Charlie and the guys from House Coffee as well for being really accommodating and keep your eyes peeled for when the book is out. I'm talking about Coffee Shop, of course. Remember, all the proceeds for that go towards the Hive, which is an amazing institution in Shrewsbury. It really is an amazing place that helps out people, young people with the arts. So make sure you support them. Today's episode is really interesting. Now, you're going to hear words like hydrogeology. Don't let that put you off. We're talking about incredible science that goes on to do an awful lot of things, and it's from what we hear from today's guest, Hannah Fraser, is there have been advancements in the last sort of 10 years that's really helping society move on. So I went into this with an open mind and an empty notepad on purpose. I went in with the old philosophy of the Shrewsbury Biscuit is I learn while you guys learn. So I ask all the dumb questions so you don't have to. So that's what this episode is all about. And of course, after the main feature interview, make sure you stick around because I'll have a catch up with you at the end before we sign off. But yes, this is Hannah Fraser from H Fraser and Elise Davis as well, who's put this together. Thank you so much. You're absolutely instrumental. We were having conversations before this back into organising this, and you guys really looked after me when I came to your offices in Shrewsbury, so thank you so much. Guys, I won't beat around the bush. I won't do another 7-minute long intro. This is episode 2, season Charlie, with Hannah Fraser. Enjoy. Hi guys, and welcome to this great episode. This is a curveball episode, I'm going to call for me, because I'm going into this episode completely blind. But from speaking to Lisa Davis about this podcast, thank you so much for setting this up for us. And what we were talking about on the phone, I was like, yes, I need to get this podcast organised because I want to talk about this. It really is interesting. So today we're at H Fraser Consulting, and I'm speaking to Hannah Fraser. How are you?
Hi, very well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to do a podcast. I've never done one before.
Wow, here you are today on the Shrewsbury Biscuit. So talk to us about where H Fraser Consulting comes from. Where does it begin for you, and what is it?
We're a consulting firm, an environmental consulting firm. We've been in business for 13 years in Shrewsbury, and I set it up having not returned from my second maternity leave, and decided that as an environmental consultant it was time to run my own business and run it in a way that I thought was kind to people and also help the planet. So we are trying to create something that is a great place to work, and where people feel that they can really make a contribution.
It's really interesting you say be kind to the environment and kind to people, because that's like two different kinds of ethics, isn't it? Because when you're speaking about the environment, there are certain things that we need to do, which I'm sure we will discuss today. But when it comes to the workplace and being kind to people, what kind of things did you take from where you've worked before and implement into your own company to make things a bit easier for people?
Yeah, it's very easy, I think, for the money motive to take over, and it's really important that businesses are obviously profitable and they're sustainable and that they can support their staff and also their directors, being a director of a company. But too often that's at the expense of people's well-being, and it's incredibly important, I think, that people feel they can flourish and grow as a human being in their workplace where they spend so much of their life, and ultimately everybody benefits.
Yeah. Because we've all been there, haven't we, where you go into work, you drain your soul, you come home, and then you got to do it again and again and again. But I feel like if you're enjoying what you're doing, and I speak to so many people where it's almost a vocation, because like what they do is what they think about, and what they do is what they do for a living they enjoy. And I feel like if you hit that, then you're winning, I feel. Yeah,
absolutely. And the things I'm really interested in are everybody in their work life has things that stop them being effective, and for everybody it's different, but lots of people have different kind of thought gremlins. I'm not good at this, or I'm really stuck, or I can't ask for help, or there's something in someone's personal life that's getting in the way. And if you can help unlock what those things are for people, then how amazing is that, and potentially can help people in all sorts of areas of their life.
I'm going to write down thought gremlins. I think that's amazing. I'm definitely stealing that from you, because that is me. Absolutely is me, because we were just talking about this with Lisa before we sat down, is that sometimes I'll sit and I have all this excess energy, and I'll just be like, oh, let's email someone about doing an interview, or let's go and make something, or let's create a new podcast or something. And then before I know it, like, there's momentum running. I'm like, oh, what have I done?
Yeah. And getting to know yourself and getting to know your own pitfalls and your own traps, and learning to, be compassionate with yourself, but also a little bit strict sometimes. No. That's that's one of your thought gremlins. Don't go down that path. Then that, I think, can help everybody. But having said that, my background is a geologist. I'm not some sort of guru, or I'm a scientist, and that's our day job. So I'm very much on a journey with this, learning hopefully how to help people be effective in their own work. In our business.
And that's where I was going to go, is where does life begin for you as an environmental consultancy? And you're saying that consultant, should I say, and then you're saying you chose to become a geologist. What drew you into that sort of career and into that direction?
Yeah, well, I was always interested in sciences. I think science is a great way to ask and answer questions about the world that we live in. I was always interested in how things work and solving problems, and so that was kind of a natural path for me. And I thought it would be a physicist or a chemist. And I took a course at college that was physics and chemistry and geology. And I just really love geology. It's kind of really applied. It gets you outside. I'm somebody who's realised late in life I don't really like sitting down all day. But so to do something that takes you out and about and looking at real things and trying to solve real problems was, it was really appealing. And I got to the end I ended up with a geology degree. That, to be honest, back then you couldn't do an awful lot with. So I then had to go and get another degree. And at that point, it was kind of like, do I study oil or water? That was the choice, really. Do I go and study getting oil out of the ground for the petrochemical companies, or do I study water and how that works and how that moves through rocks and aquifers? And I thought, yeah, we're always going to need water, aren't we? So I went down that route. And it's always been really fascinating work.
That's an interesting fork in the road, isn't it? Because you always associate oil with money and water with the sciences. And I guess there's an intrigue there and how this all works and how you can affect the universe around you. So, yeah, you chose to go for that one instead.
It seems such a fundamental part of life and a building block for life, water. We obviously can't live without it. And there are always going to be issues around water and need for water and need to keep water clean. For all sorts of things in life. It supports, what we eat. It supports the nature around us. It supports, obviously, we need to drink water, all of us, a lot every day, and just how that gets into our homes and where it comes from. All those things are just part of things that is easy to take for granted, but actually it's incredibly important. And I do remember at the time thinking, I bet there'd be more money in the petrochemical sector. And I just thought, no, I really actually want to be interested in what I do. And I want to think that I can believe in what I do, and that I don't feel that I'm doing something that I don't really particularly want to be part of. So, that was the choice for me, to do something interesting that I could feel I could engage with.
So you get the qualifications. You come out of school and you're like, I've got these qualifications now. I can make a difference. What's the first thing you sort of step into doing? What's your first sort of job using those qualifications?
Do you know, I still say it was the best job I had. I was young. I was completely fearless, and I loved every minute of working for a consulting firm that worked for the mining sector. And it hadn't really occurred to me at that point in time, being sort of very young and naive, whether or not that was a good or a bad kind of environmental thing to do. And I still think that anybody who thinks metal mining is bad, look at what you eat your dinner with every day. You know, metal cutlery has got to come from somewhere. And that job had a great boss who was really good at teaching the basics of what I needed to learn, but also I had some fantastic trips. So I got to sit in a small boat about 800 metres below ground in a gold mine in France, taking water samples out of a flooded kind of passage. I was sitting there in the dark with my light turned off on my helmet, thinking, because I had to pump something through a filter, and thinking this battery might not last. I better turn the torch off. And I just loved all this adventure. I got to drive a 4-wheel drive vehicle all by myself. It was wonderful. I had a 3-month stint in South Africa where I got to go 2.5 kilometres underground in a gold mine. So I went down a lift in the pitch dark again, and then along a train track, and then down a conveyor belt that carried the waste rock back up. So we jumped on the empty bit that was going back down, and then got to the rock face, and then sort of walked all the way back up through this these tunnels where you could see the rock types and see where the water was coming into the mine, because they were trying to predict, if they extended the mine, how much more water would they need to deal with, because you obviously have to pump it all out so that it doesn't flood. So those things were just amazing. My favourite story from the mining visits I had was when I went to Zambia, and there was a small gold mine that was just starting up again. So I saw their very first gold pour, which was amazing. But because I was there to look at the groundwater and the hydrogeology, the tribal chiefs and the mine manager said that we had to go in. There was an old underground mine there, and we had to go and cast the demons out of the old mine because it had flooded and killed some people in the 1930s. So we sat there sort of about half an hour, again in the pitch black, apart from a little candle, with the ceremonies and this sort of chanting going on around us. And it was really quite intense. And then suddenly this bat flew past my head, and I jumped a mile. But that was it then. That was the demon having been cast out. So that was me as the water lady. Yeah, we did.
You were the target of the bait. I love that.
So yeah, it was an amazing experience. So I absolutely loved that job, and it was fantastic.
Being underground is such a weird feeling. I was lucky enough to go to the salt mines in Colombia, Zipaquirá.
Oh, yeah.
And incredible, but like what I got from it is like the way the air moves through, like it feels so breezy being underground, and you'd expect it to be like warm and clammy, but it was like breezy.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, and the temperature's normally pretty constant, so whatever's going on the surface, you kind of feel like you're in a kind of safe place. I was quite enjoyed going underground. Yeah.
What do you learn when you're underground? When you're looking around the rock, I mean, obviously it depends where you are in the world and what you're looking for, but like as being qualified now, I imagine you can walk through anywhere and be like, that's what this is, and that's what this is, and you can tell like a story in time. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the most amazing things about geology, full stop, whether you're above or below ground, is you get this real perspective in terms of time and how old the universe is. And if you think of, the universe being a day old, we're kind of like the last second at the end of it, and you get this incredible perspective of how kind of small we are and how potentially insignificant. And in a funny way, that's kind of comforting. Whatever's going on in your world that you think is extraordinarily big and overwhelming or difficult, if you just take the perspective that the billions and billions of years that everything that you look around has been around for, and realise how really transient your problems are, then I think that's great.
I remember walking through Shrewsbury Museum. Always recommend taking a walk through there with the kids and learning about, I don't know if this is correct, but like that we were underwater a few million years ago, and like the way we've moved around the earth and the way things have changed, like to think that we were under the ocean at one point is quite
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, we've been, and all the red stone that you see around in Shropshire, that was a big red desert,
Wow.
you know, and all it was kind of like windblown sand dunes that made those rocks. So
I remember being up at Hencote a couple of weeks ago. We were trying to get a podcast with them, and they were talking about there's an old riverbed, like that's where they grow in these vines that make this amazing wine, and because of the minerals that are left behind, and the way the ground is set up is like a unique place in Shropshire where they can do this because the slope is at a certain angle and they got all these minerals in the ground. That for me is really fascinating. Like,
yeah, amazing. And Shropshire is just extraordinary in terms of geological diversity. There's places in the country where there's not an awful lot going on. It's all pretty much the same. We've kind of got a bit of everything here. So yeah, for anybody who's a bit of a fan of rocks, my kids, whenever we go walking, say, "Oh God,
here we go,
nerding about rocks again." Oh.
I love that. I'd love to have it's almost like a secret. You know something that other people don't, and you can walk past them and be like, "I know what that is," and you don't.
I have to say that because these days I mostly think about how water moves through rocks. So quite often I go, "Oh yeah, I don't know, it's a grey rock."
And let's talk about how we turn this into a business. How do we make money or a career out of this thing that you've learned? What steps do you make and what journey do you go through for that?
Yeah, so it's essentially, and it's a really interesting time to be involved in this business, because when I first got involved, environmental consultancy is really about trying to help various enterprises, almost always corporations of one sort or another, do their business but minimise their environmental impact. And normally businesses, or certainly sort of 20 years ago, businesses just wanted to comply with the law. So they wanted to be compliant, they wanted to minimise the amount of money they spent on being compliant, and they wanted to minimise their business risk. So they wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be, a pollution event, or there wasn't something going on in their operation that they could be prosecuted for. So that was really the setting, was compliance and risk management. And sometimes that was around funding. If you needed funding from a bank to do something and the bank was saying, yeah, but you can't do it if you're going to pollute. So, you have to get it right. So, there's legislation and also kind of funding requirements that mean that companies have to comply with certain amounts of legislation, and that's where our expertise comes in, is to help them do that.
Okay, so say for example somebody wants to build a factory and they want to make sure that everything that comes out of the factory is safe. They need to work out sort of how to dispose of the byproduct from this factory. Is that where you come into
different ways that we might help them? The first thing would be, okay, the ground that you're going to buy, is it already contaminated? And you're going to have to prove at the end of your operation that you didn't contaminate it. So you need a baseline survey of what was going on in the ground. So, yeah, we go and do those surveys for people and say, either, it's fine, it's clean, or no, actually, look, there's this and that wrong with it. We might say to somebody, I wouldn't buy that one if I were you. Or, yeah, do buy it, but you need to lock, a couple of million off the price tag, because that's what it's going to cost you to get it back to where it needs to be.
I remember there's a place in Telford by the town park, and it was an old battery factory, and they've built houses on top of it now. But I remember years ago people going, no, they could never build anything on that ground, it's contaminated, there's all battery stuff in there. And I'm thinking, well, they've just built a brand new estate there, so who knows who's right about that. But
yeah, we do a lot of work that's involved. It's basically reclaiming land and regenerating land. And I think that's a fantastic thing to do if it can be done safely and that it's done properly, so that it genuinely is safe. Then what better thing to do than to turn a mouldering old site that's just derelict into something that people can live on? It's got to be done the right way. There are some cowboys in the industry, and this is why you need legislation. And people talk about the difficulties of getting planning permission and all that kind of thing, but from my side of the fence, it's important those rules are there and there are real checks to make sure that people are doing things right.
And there's lots of. I was thinking about. I was down that part of Telford not long ago, and there's a street called Energizer Avenue or something like that. So I don't know, battery factory.
That's the legacy, isn't it? Yeah. You hope that's the only legacy, the contaminated sites.
But everybody's talking a lot about contamination in Shropshire at the moment. It's a big talking point. Obviously, there's the river and the stuff that's been put in the river. There's the stuff that's going on in Ironbridge, that they've just knocked down a power station where they're going to be building houses. Like, it seems to be on the tip of everybody's tongue at the moment. Are you guys involved with that? Are you seeing a lot of that? What do you make of what's going on?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to catch anybody out and get political, by the way. I don't normally talk about stuff like this in the podcast.
So we kind of work nationally. We're fairly specialist in what we do. So when these things kind of hit the news, it's kind of our bread and butter. So we don't find it that surprising or shocking.
Yeah.
Anybody who's got any little bit of knowledge in anything kind of recognises that often the papers don't get things quite right.
Yeah. Shock horror.
Yeah, exactly. So, for us, those kinds of things, certainly the sort of redevelopment of a legacy industrial site, that's really kind of familiar ground to us. The things going on with the rivers at the moment is really interesting. And I think it's a fantastically positive thing that so many people are interested. Again, 20 years ago, people weren't that interested. And it's a real case of people power shifting the dial. And there's a lot of discussion about sewage is one thing, nitrates and phosphates, so nutrients, is another thing. And it's part of what we're seeing is a kind of general better environmental awareness. But I was talking earlier about how our work was often governed by kind of compliance and that kind of thing. We're seeing a real shift now to people wanting to make environmental improvements. And some of that is because various companies have got to do things around getting their carbon emissions down or neutralising their carbon emissions. And other people have got other various commitments that mean they're kind of like, okay, we need to think bigger than just doing no harm. We need to actually improve things. And we need to offset our various activities in different ways. So we need people like H Fraser Consulting to tell us how we can improve this environment, create a new habitat, and we're just part of a team of many experts that might help with those sorts of things. And it's that kind of general shift that I think so many people now are much more aware of what's going on in the environment, that things are changing and the attitudes are changing.
Do you think it's something to do with a generational thing, or do you think it's because of this now endless stream of information that we've got in these devices we carry around and whatever?
I think it is about knowledge, definitely. I remember, again, 20 years ago, I was doing some training at a place that was actually in Cork in Ireland.
Oh,
and
my family live in County Cork.
Oh yeah, well, it was a lovely trip there, and we were training some local authority officers, and we were at a facility that I can't remember very much about, apart from all across the walls everywhere. It was kind of like a place where children would come from schools, and there was a whole load of information about recycling, sustainability, environmental pollution management, and all those sorts of things. And I was thinking, this is brilliant. So these kids that were being kind of immersed in the idea about environmental sustainability and good approaches and caring for the planet that we live on are now sort of 25, 30. So these are the people that are now in organisations starting to run things. So I think that education and that awareness, as young people grow and take responsibility and start actually running our country in various ways through all the different ways that, as individuals we're involved in our world, we're seeing a real shift. But we are also seeing a real policy shift at governmental and kind of running the big corporates level. There's a much clearer sense that if the UK is going to be carbon neutral, then corporates need to be carbon neutral. And how
clear as in transparent, as in like, this is what we're doing. You got to, or the path is clear.
I think that the path is, it's still not clear how people are going to do this, I think. But in terms of the commitment to it needing to be done, I think it's much clearer that there are those commitments. Yeah.
I remember when I was working in Telford, I'd drive from Shrewsbury to Telford, I'd go down the back road and I'd see all these McDonald's wrappers all up down the country road, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's getting worse. Like, I'm thinking, these kids, man, all these kids. I think that's what you do when you get older, right?
Yeah.
But like, you look back at like some of the greatest innovations. I use Boyan Slat as an example. He's a young guy at the age of 16 I think he designed a device that clears up plastic from water, and he's now clearing up rivers in Malaysia, and like he's like absolutely having a really positive effect on the environment around the world. And I'm thinking, actually, you know, these kids got a chance. you know?
No, I'm all for you. I've got 2 kids myself, are both teenagers now, and I just think that age group and the sort of late teens, early 20s, they're amazing. They're full of ideas. They don't have a lot of kind of things holding them back that you do when you're a little bit older. Perhaps you kind of think, oh, I shouldn't say that, I shouldn't do that. And, you know, they have got some real principles when it comes to the environment. They believe that we should not be polluting the planet that sustains us.
And then just to take it back, and hydrogeology, that is basically how water moves through rock, or is that how that is exactly what it is, right? Okay, because I don't want to see.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, how does water move through rocks? And then that helps things like if you want to have a borehole for groundwater supply. Let's say you want to dig a big hole in the ground because you need some foundations, but it fills with water and that's groundwater. How do you deal with that? How do you pump it out? How much? All that kind of stuff. If you've got something that's polluting an aquifer, so an aquifer is obviously a rock that holds water and stores it and yields a lot, so you could use it for something. If that's polluted, how far are those things going to travel? Does it matter? Wow. What would you do to clean it up? Those are our areas of expertise.
These are things you just don't think about when they're building like a new shopping centre or the new estate over here or this stuff. Like, what impact is that going to have? Like, not just like, are people going to leave their rubbish out and there's going to be lots of extra cars, but like the ground around them, is there going to be like pollution that's going to seep in from there directly into a river? Because I live Sutton Grange in Shrewsbury, and there's like, obviously that's an interesting place. There's lots of new estates being built there, and up the road from us there's an estate, and in the middle of it, as you drive past, there's like a massive drain around grass, and I'm thinking like they must have built that on like swampland or something. I don't know how that works, but they must have thought, we'll just put a drain in, it's fine. I mean, that.
So this is another interesting thing that's changed in the last sort of 10 years is sustainable drainage on development sites. Again, something that we get involved with. As you build more and more hard surfaces, when it rains, that rain just runs off really quickly across hard surface into rivers. So you end up that floods end up with kind of bigger, sharper peaks in response to rainfall events. So you get worse flood events if you have a kind of storm that's going to cause a flood. So trying to get that water to get into the ground or to hold it up on the site so it just runs off as it would have done from a green field before you built your housing estate is really important.
We had a chat with Niall McCann. He's a really great National Geographical explorer. He's a great guy, and we went on this tirade about plastic grass and all these things. It's like plastic grass should be illegal as an abomination because it just forces the water to rush straight to the river.
Yeah.
And I was like, I live on one of those flash new estates. I'm really sorry. But
well, I'm just thinking about getting our patio redone, and I'm kind of thinking, what should I do? Because it's really tempting just to cover it all over with tarmac.
Yeah, my wife's the same. I love a nice garden, but then I've got to do the work. I'm not very reliable.
Well, as an individual, I kind of think I could put in a great kind of sud scheme and have a tank, and I could route it around to the pond in the back garden and all this kind of stuff. You kind of think that's just not affordable on an individual basis. I'll come up with some sort of compromise.
So you start your own company, H Fraser Consulting.
Yeah.
After years of being in this environment, what do you decide to sort of start doing differently to what everyone else? Or is there something that, after being exposed to that kind of environment and in that field, what do you feel like, I'm going to take a bit from this and a bit from that and make it your own?
Yeah. So I think the things that excite me about running a business and the way I want to take things forward are around certainly really high quality service. We deal with knowledge basically, and that's what we kind of give to people and effectively sell. But can we actually use our knowledge for greater benefit as well? Perhaps for different endeavours, and being more collaborative outside of the commercial environment. So one of the things that I've been involved with really since before the business started really is the Shropshire Water Forum, which I don't know if you remember Shrewsbury probably 10 years ago, the University of Chester set up in Shrewsbury.
Yeah, the Guildhall.
Yeah. And at that time, they had a group called CREST, which is the Centre for Research in Environmental Science and Technology. And at that point, I kind of thought this could be a fantastic opportunity to sort of have some collaboration amongst the sort of consultants that are operating in Shrewsbury. As a bit of an aside, Shrewsbury's really peculiar in terms of being a small market town that has got a really, really high proportion of the hydrogeologists in the UK living here, weirdly and oddly, and nobody quite knows why.
We had having this conversation with Charlie Adlard yesterday about cartoonists,
Yeah.
and so hydrogeologists and comic book creators. That's what we got.
Yeah, with this kind of like hotspot, almost like a global hotspot, really. So there are some big names in terms of corporate consulting firms that have got a head office in Shrewsbury, because it's a good place to recruit hydrogeologists if you need them.
One of the most flooded towns in the UK. Let's go there.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to nerd about rocks, then yeah, this is definitely the place to be. But these firms are all kind of natural competitors, really. And I remember as a young person, when I first moved to Shrewsbury and worked for a firm here, being told not to socialise with those people. You know, you're not allowed to give away any sort of company secrets, and you shouldn't be socialising with the competition. And I always thought that, but of course we all know each other, and various people have moved around different firms, and lots of people have kind of gone and set up their own firms and work more collaboratively with each other. And I remember thinking when the university joined, we've got all this expertise and all this talent in the town, and it's ridiculous that we don't kind of make more of that, that we just have this kind of competitive stance. So the Shropshire Water Forum was set up really to, in the very early days, just to provide a platform so that people could come and network and also kind of share technical information, so technical talks about water and hydrogeology, and we had some mining hydrogeology talks, and we had some wetland hydrogeology talks, and all sorts of different topics that we as water rock nerds would find really interesting, and that has grown, which is really interesting, to have a bigger focus on, okay, how can we collaborate with the universities that are local to us, the various agencies and regulatory agencies, the water companies, and kind of understand our patch, understand our catchment better. We're quite interested in doing some research into how water gets into the ground and how the various things you might do through development would actually help improve that and get more kind of water into the ground, so that helps water supply and stops flooding and all those, and creates biodiversity, and so lots of good things, but not very much is known about it. So the Water Forum is becoming a kind of vehicle for that, but also really importantly for education, sharing knowledge, hopefully drawing young people through into the industry, because we have a real difficulty with our industry at the moment in terms of skills and training. There's one course in the UK that really teaches this in its entirety, and that's at postgraduate level, and it's got a high proportion of foreign students who then go abroad, or if they wanted to stay, the new visa regulations really mean that their wage that you have to pay them is completely uncompetitive. So there's effectively real barriers to taking up the talent that has been trained here. So we think it's really important to locally try and promote our industry to young people. We had a really excellent sixth form student with us over the summer, which has been really fun, introducing her to what we do. And we'd like to do more and more of that, and have the Shropshire Water Forum be a bit of a pinpoint for that.
Yeah.
So that's been really fun. It's not my day job, but it's something that the company's firmly behind.
It could create a legacy, though. It could create a legacy of something that you guys haven't thought before. It could create like a new way of thinking, and I think that's really important, especially intergenerational collaboration. I think when it comes to science and innovation, I think we need to hear each other out. I think, and that's what you guys are doing, is you're facilitating that, and that's really important. I mean, we always, when I was younger, we had this idea of scientists being these stuffy old men in coats and stuff. But that's not the way. That's not. I mean, I think maybe something like Big Bang Theory, a TV show that kind of opens up. There's a bit of fun. You can play with things. You can experiment, and
I honestly think it has been the most rewarding career I could think of, because it's just interesting, and you get to see some amazing things, how building sites work, all sorts of industrial heritage about how things used to work and kind of legacy issues around that. And you're always trying to solve a problem for somebody. So it's loads of fun. But quite a lot of us are quite introverted. So to provide a kind of place and a platform that makes it easy for people to talk to each other, but also easy for people who are interested to come and kind of go, oh, I'm interested in that, who can I talk to there? I think it's really important, because it's easy for us to sit in front of our laptops and just not speak to anybody.
I remember I produced a few audio tours around Shrewsbury, historical, with other people, but mainly Nigel Baker. He's a great archaeologist in the area, but he does like these great tours of the river. So like when you talk about history and culture and stuff, he says if you get on the river level, you can see a lot more. And we had this idea of like doing a podcast in a kayak or something, like while we're doing these things. And I was thinking, I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, but what if I capsize and ruin my microphones? I couldn't quite get my head around it. So we've never done it.
Well, I can recommend the picnic boat from Sabrina.
Yeah, we've done a podcast on that before. Yeah, River Safety.
We just had our, we had a social do on over the summer, which was a lot of fun.
The little jetty one that goes out, yeah. It's great, isn't it?
Kingfisher, it was great.
Maybe that's a good idea though. Maybe if I can get maybe you guys, Nigel Baker, talk about some history, some science, and find somewhere we can sit and just look at things on the river. What can we see around us? Because there's always been this negative talk about the Severn at the moment. People talking about E. coli breakouts and stuff. My son was like in the Reebrook a couple of weeks ago, and he's like putting his head in the water trying to swim and everything. And some woman comes back and she's like, "There's E. coli in there," and there's like so much misinformation about the rivers. Maybe if we did something to just be like, it's not that bad. Well, there are ways you can enjoy the water without being scared of it.
Yeah, so we've got a world swimmer on our team here, and also a cox and rower. So we get a lot of talk about the river and how polluted or not polluted it is on a given day. There's no doubt that there's a little bit too much sewage in the water.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but sometimes. And I think more than there was. But there's also no doubt that both government and water industry are fully aware that this needs to change. And you are starting to see some people do some different things, which is good.
How can you change that though? Because it's something that we've done for a millennia, right? We dump our crap in the waters. That's what they've always done, right? So what's changed? What's innovated? And what can we do to sort of help that?
It's basically around infrastructure. I mean, you don't have to. Basically, what happens is when it rains, the system overflows, and you get much more. They're called storm overflows. Mm-hmm. And when it's heavy rain, you just end up with everything going out into the river instead of the foul sewage going through the treatment plant. And that happens on a more regular basis, I think, just because the system's a little bit overloaded. So it's really just about having the infrastructure there. But of course, that all costs money. So ultimately, the you and I, as the ratepayers, have to be willing to pay for that.
And when it comes to, I mean, I said, you said you work nationally, but say you were working in a place similar to Shrewsbury or somewhere that is likely to flood, and somebody wants to build a business. Do you guys advise on sort of fail safes and sort of like how can we make this safe in case the universe just dumps a ton of water on us and we're going to get flooded?
Yeah. So we do flood risk assessments, and we have got some fantastic associates that we work with who do more complicated surface water calculations and modelling and all those sorts of things. Yeah, so and SUDS is a big part of that, sustainable drainage system, so that you know exactly what water is falling on your site over a long time period. So people tend to model when they're looking at this the 100-year storm event. So the flood event that's the biggest one you're likely to really ever see. Mm-hmm. And you have to design a site so that you can contain that water on your site and it doesn't all go shooting off.
Wow.
Yeah.
What other things are you working on there? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you're really eager to tell people? Because I think this is all fascinating, but I'm just firing questions at you because I'm like, oh, what's this do and what's that do? But I don't want to get in the way of what you.
So if I told you some of the things, my favourite projects for the past few years, we had a lovely one that was somebody wanted. It was a fairly innocuous development. It was just some warehouses, but because of the ground conditions, they needed to do piling. And it happened to be not very far away from a public water supply borehole in a chalk aquifer. So there was concern that if you piled through the chalk aquifer, just the kind of vibration and the banging would create turbidity, which is when you get really fine sediment held up in water, and that would then travel through fractures in the chalk to the public water supply. Now they have a cut-off, so if it goes above a certain level, they just have to cut the borehole off. So that's megalitres a day, 20 odd megalitres a day. That is a megalitre, by the way, is 1,000 metre cubed.
Wow.
So it's a lot of water being pumped out of these boreholes, just gone, and that obviously affects that's drinking water supply for people. So our job was to show that this could be done safely, which we did, because it was. So that was a really interesting one. We had a lovely project that, again, it was a development site that included some very big old quarry pits that were full of water. And very late in the day, somebody kind of thought, oh, that might not actually be accumulated rainwater. That might be groundwater. We better get somebody who can tell us how much water there's going to be. Will we need to keep pumping it? If we do have to keep pumping it because the water carries on coming in through the ground.
It's just going to appear again, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. How much would we need to pump? Do we need a license? All those sorts of things. And what we ended up doing was a really big test. So we just pumped the whole lot as hard as we could, having done lots of sums, and decided that the best way forward was to just test it. That's what we did. So, and that again was resolved so that everybody knew what they needed to do, and the job went ahead. So
it must feel really good when you got people scratching their head like, oh my God, are we going to do this thing? You're like, what?
yeah, this is the way forward. And the fun thing with both of those was that we had all our equipment hooked up via telemetry so that we could see what was happening to water levels in the quarry lakes or in the boreholes at our desks in real time. So that was quite fun. And we make a phone call. I think the pump might have gone in lake number such and such, and he's turning back on again because we could see the water levels starting to come back up. So
wow.
Yeah. So
I mean, these are things that we don't, I think me, the average Joe, and the people probably going about our day to day don't think about these things, but they are fundamentally important when it comes to like drinking water.
Yeah.
It's people like you that keep us kind of safe.
Absolutely. So here in Shrewsbury, groundwater is a huge important part of our daily lives. In North Shropshire, we've got a red sandstone aquifer, and one of the ways that we deal with the fact that there's not enough water in the summer and too much water in the winter is that we rely on the aquifer storing water in the winter, and then that gets pumped out in the summer and augments the water levels in the River Severn, and then by the time that then travels down to the Severn Trent water outtake, and they can take it out and stick it in our taps, basically.
Wow.
So yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
What do you think are like the best things about your job? What do you enjoy the most? I mean, like, because you talk about the adventure, you talk about like solving problems, and you talk about being genuinely fascinated by geology and hydrogeology. Like, what do you enjoy the most?
I think it is the problem solving, and I think that cuts across whether it's science and geology or people and running a team. It's the kind of, okay, we've got a problem. How do we solve it? How do we make things better?
I'm going to take some photos while we're talking. I hate doing that. I always forget to take photos. I always like finish podcasts and I took 2 photos and they're both awful. So, but then at the same time, like with Charlie Adlard yesterday, I was just like shoving a camera in his face and he's just like, what are you doing? Like, so if you see me taking photos, don't worry about it. No. There's no way of doing it naturally, is there? There's no way of going, while we're talking. How do you take your mind off these things? Because this seems like it's something that, like, we talk about vocation. I was talking about this with Charlie yesterday, like, he, for example, is always thinking about making things, and if he doesn't have a job, he's kind of wandering around trying to find things to do.
Yeah.
What is it when it comes to geology and hydrogeology and what you guys do? Are you always thinking about it, and how do you try and switch off?
I really try that. I do need to switch off. Otherwise, I just end up going into a bit of a spiral of kind of being too busy in my head. And then you start to not think strategically enough about what you're doing, or you get too much into the detail, and you need to step back. Even just on a project, often having a break, your brain does the work for you while you're not thinking about it. So I think it's so important to take a break, step back, be in your life. So the things that are really important for me are kind of trying to be present where you are. I really try not to have my phone that much at home. I kind of try and stick it in a different room and not be distracted. I really enjoy music and playing the piano. That's my kind of like, if I need to really unhook my brain because it's too busy with something, that's the thing that I'll do.
I went on a really interesting podcast talking about piano music. I went on the Impro Pod podcast. I got invited on there with Luke. He's a great guy. He asked for 2 stories in my life, and I told him these stories, and he improvised music based on those stories on the piano.
That's amazing.
I'll send the link out on the Shrewsbury Biscuit. But yeah, music is a great mover, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and a great way to communicate. We find at home that it's just a way for us to sit and relax and chat, and just lovely. And that's not sort of piano music, that's just any old music. And the fantastic thing about I think having kids is that they introduce you to loads more stuff that you don't get stale with all the things that you grew up listening to, which is amazing. The other great sort of release for me is being in the garden, although currently most of my plants are dead because I've been teen too busy at work. So that for me is a bit of a is like a bellwether. If the plants on the patio are not doing well, then I've probably been spending too much time at work.
Yeah. Guilty. When it comes to international problems, or we talk about infrastructure and the way things are put together, is there anything you look at around the world and think, I'd love to get my hands on that? Is there anything because I imagine there's so many problems out there that could be solved by you guys, but obviously is that you got to do the work that pays, right?
So I think the big problem for our planet at the moment is carbon.
Yeah.
And that's not really kind of related to what I do as a hydrogeologist. But my insight on that from the work that I do is that we should be using our land better, and we should be trying to solve many problems with our land and think about all the different problems that we're trying to solve. The land is clearly so important for food production. We can't live without that, and we shouldn't be doing things that compromise our ability to feed ourselves, clearly. However, what about habitats? What about the land storing water so that we don't flood ourselves? What about the land storing carbon? Because there's so many ways apart from just trees. You can change farming so that you're planting different things that store more carbon. You can create water habitats that are amazing at storing carbon. And so for me, perhaps it wouldn't be a piece of kit. It would be a way of thinking.
Different type of agriculture, or just a different way of thinking about agriculture? Different
way of thinking about how we use the land. That agriculture is hugely important. It's got to be sustainable. But what other different ways can we think about how we use land? Because there's so much land that isn't cities and isn't where people live.
I was watching the news a few weeks ago, and people may remember that they're talking about chicken poo in the water supply.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not something that you don't walk around thinking about. I wonder how they deal with chicken poo until I saw it on the news, and I was kind of like, actually, yeah, if you've got a place that stores millions of birds, how do you deal with this problem? Because it's meant to be bad for the water, right? It's full of toxic.
Totally. Phosphates is the thing with chicken poo, and phosphates are really good for growing algae, and they then grow in the river, and they then choke everything else of oxygen, and you end up killing all the other things that are in the river. So, and that's a big driver in certain parts of the country, because you have special areas of conservation that are supposed to be low in phosphorus, and they're too high. So that then is really restricting what people can do and how they can develop houses and all those sorts of things. Essentially, if you build a house, you are putting phosphate and nitrate through sewage into the environment. Mm-hmm. People are not allowed to do that anymore. They have to make it neutral. So they have to go and do something to offset that activity. So perhaps change a field from being a cornfield with fertilizer application to a wood that doesn't have fertilizer application, those sorts of things. But ultimately, it's not a very joined up way of thinking about it. And the wastewater treatment works, the sewage works, and kind of farming more generally needs to be a bit more joined up about how you actually prevent phosphates from getting in the river.
Do you think tradition gets in the way of innovation sometimes when it comes to like farming and things like that? Because I think I learned one of the worst phrases to use is we've always done it this way. Like you've got to think outside the box sometimes.
I'm not sure it's tradition. I think it's basically money. That there are plenty of farmers who would be willing to use the land the way that our country decides that this land should be used, but they need to be able to run a business doing it. They need to be able to create their own business and have that thrive. So there has to be the right kind of policy to put the right rewards in place for using the land in the right way. And
I just want to add that was no way meant as a dig to the hero farmers out there, like keeping us fed. I'm just saying you guys are doing what you do. I mean, obviously we got a growing population, so we need to grow more food, which maybe farms are growing or trying to find ways to be a bit more efficient in the way they pump food out. So maybe corners are cut, or maybe they're doing something different, or maybe they're struggling with the weight of their duty and how to deal with these things, the waste in particular.
So something that's really interesting, that in the 1970s, there were huge grants for farmers to underdrain their fields. And that means that the grass grows better, the sheep graze better, you get higher productivity. So a real focus on improving farm productivity. And now, of course, we recognise that a lot of that underdrainage means that when it rains, the water shoots straight off the fields and into the ditches and ultimately into the rivers really pretty quickly. And if we were now thinking from a point of view of flood prevention or flood mitigation, you wouldn't do that. Or would you? Somebody somewhere needs to decide what's more important. Was it the sheep grazing or the flood prevention? But having decisions that hold all these things in mind and make the right decision that is the best compromise, I think is the new way of thinking that we need.
I remember driving towards Buildwas. I used to do this journey almost every night, and as you go over the top of the hill, as you come down, there was like a natural spring that runs across the road, and it would freeze in the winter, and it would be quite dangerous. I remember the one night I came past, and they like dug it up and put like a gravel on top of it. I was thinking like, what a shame! Like, I mean, I get it. They've drained it, so it's still there. It's just underneath, or it's just going through the cracks. But I thought, we're having this impact on the environment around us, and
Well, every now and then, if you walk down a street on a quiet day, you'll hear a drain that's going and going and going, and you kind of think, oh, is that a burst pipe? Often it's not. It's a stream that actually isn't a stream anymore. It's just been put through a big pipe, and it's just that's the way it runs now. It's underground, and none of us see it. So it'd be lovely to see some of those things restored, because it's I
remember when I was younger, because I grew up in Wrexham, and I remember people saying there's a river that runs underneath Wrexham. I was like, pish posh, but apparently it's true. There's a river that runs underneath Wrexham. Yeah. Not over the top, underneath. Yeah. That's great innovation, I think.
Build something, definitely.
Until things still start subsiding and falling into big holes, then.
Yeah. Or the other argument is that if you had a river running through with the river banks, there was a nice place for people to sit and have lunch, or you could open some coffee shops around it. You could make a real feature out of these things.
Do you get a lot of questions about Shrewsbury in particular with what you do and where you guys are? And because there's a problem, it is a problem, isn't it? But it's a problem that people, I guess, are used to in Shrewsbury, the flooding, and how do you deal with a river that is roaring through our town and causing the problems it causes?
It is talked about a lot. The work that we're doing around trying to look at how in Shropshire you might get more of that water into the ground is really interesting. And we're currently supporting a MSc student to have a look at that and do some research into.
Wow.
And this is a small business that we're running here. We don't have really deep pockets, but we just think these things are quite important and quite interesting. And that's obviously with the Shropshire Water Forum helping with that as well. So.
Amazing. And where do you guys see yourself, like in the next few years? You say you're small and you're growing. We're talking about you growing steadily, but you just want to be able to sort of keep track of things, but like, where do you ideally see yourself in, say, 5 years or so?
Yeah, so in 5 years or so, there's a few things that I think I'd be delighted if all these things happened. I'd like the business to be a size that is, definitely bigger than it is now. Still probably a small business, 20, 30 people. That's going to be a lot of work in itself to sustainably grow an organisation that can kind of function like that. I'd love to see the Shropshire Water Forum really operating as I'd like it to, collaboratively, being a place that promotes Shropshire for water science, being a place that shares knowledge locally, that helps be a pivotal point for kind of citizen science and people getting involved in measuring things and understanding things and perhaps generating some useful information, and collaborating with universities and regulators and water companies and all that kind of thing, and the nature conservation people as well, because that's all really important. And I kind of think what would make me really happy, and the thing that perhaps keeps me awake at night the most, is really around the people that you feel responsible for as when you're running a business. Are they thriving? Is their professional life rewarding them in ways that is not just about money? Are they actually growing as people and, exploring themselves as well as their technical areas of expertise?
And that's really exciting, because I feel like when you speak to an employer that wants their employees to sort of grow in themselves, and you're giving them a license to be creative, to be daring, and to go out there and try and find things out for himself rather than sticking to a fact sheet. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that's an important license to give someone in their day-to-day job. You don't see that very often.
Yeah, I'm fairly convinced, and I'm hoping that life won't prove me wrong, but I'm fairly convinced that most people, given some reasonable boundaries, but then a pretty free rein and a lot of trust, do their best. And if you can give them the tools and the knowledge and the training and then the scope to be themselves and do well, then most people will absolutely grab that.
And if people wanted to find out more about sort of hydrogeology and what you guys do, without obviously going to university and getting a degree about it, what's some good sort of resources that people can go and look at and find out more about the hydrogeology in their town, things like that?
Yeah, so the British Geological Survey has got some quite good pages on it. There's the hydrogeology group of the Geological Society. These aren't all easy to find. There is the UK Groundwater Forum, which has got some kind of information about what the subject is and how you might get involved with it, and some kind of people stories as well about the kind of careers that people have in this. So they're all on the web.
I'm really fascinated by this. I think it's great. I'm so glad. So just to add a bit of context to this, but I came to this completely blind. I didn't know what we were going to be talking. I kind of had an idea, like I mentioned, but I'm fascinated by this because it's not just problem solving, which is great in itself. It's not just talking about like society and how we work with the water around us, but like it's the adventure of like finding out about this rock and what does this do and what does that do. And
honestly, every project is different, and that's the way we like to run things here, because that's, I think, what I'm interested in. Every site you kind of think, and you might know a bit about it because you've worked somewhere not too far away and all that kind of thing. Every single problem, every site is different, and that is the science that we do. We have to go and measure things and make our assessments as to what's going to happen with this particular site. It's fascinating.
How do you keep it fresh though? I mean, because obviously we're in Shropshire and we go around, but how do you keep those the synapses going with like new things to go and find you? Do you have to go and find yourself like booking a holiday somewhere to go and look at something different? Maybe cure your curiosities, I guess. Like
everyone's got to have balance, haven't they? And then you can't get too much into one thing, otherwise it gets stale. So for me, having decent breaks. I'm just trying to get into a real good gym routine at the moment.
Me too.
Yeah.
Hit Sona Shrewsbury. Shout out to those guys. We're working really well together. But yeah, this is fascinating. Thank you so much for organising this, Lisa. It's been really cool.
It's been amazing to speak to you. I've really enjoyed it.
where can people sort of find out about what you do? I mean, maybe if they're on about, maybe commissioning you to do some work. I mean,
yeah, I would be delighted to chat to anybody who's even just interested for interest's sake, but most definitely if they're interested because they'd like us to do some work for them, then H Fraser at hfraserconsulting.co.uk or 01743 352 797.
Absolutely. And any links you want us to put, we'll put on the bottom of the readout of this podcast. But thank you, Hannah, for chatting to me. Thank you, Lisa, for organising this.
Thank you.
This has been really good. Make sure you guys stick around because I'll do a little outro afterwards and say goodbye to you guys properly. But this has been great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great to meet you.
Cheers. So there we go. What a fantastic episode. Thank you to Hannah and Lisa for putting that together. I really enjoyed that. It's a different level. It's a different speed. I'm really taking in information and really getting enthralled into the conversation. Me and my element. That's what this feature episode is. And we've got another one coming next week as well. I'll speak to Josh Lobley from the Shirish Rovers, speaking about music. So we go from science to music. The variation on this podcast is just incredible, guys. You're so lucky. And we have I think we've overfilled capacity for this season already with the Shrewsbury Biscuit. The interest of coming on the show has been unsurmountable. There's so many people that are coming on this show. It's incredible. I think we're going to be doing more than 10 episodes for this season. I think we're going to stretch to about 12. We've got 11 booked up already, and one I'm really hopeful for that I'm still waiting to hear back off. So lots of interested people coming on the show. And yeah, it's been really nice. I want to say a thank you today because as I'm recording this outro, today I've been to the Quarry Kitchen, which is being run by Beth Heath and the guys there, run by Chris Burt, amazing chef. They were doing some filming there today, so they invited people to come and sample some food and have some filming done. And I was there today. I actually took my laptop to do a bit of editing while I was doing it, being sociably unsociable as usual. And I just want to say thank you for the free breakfast and the free coffee. If you're lucky, if you're in a bind around town and you're looking for somewhere to go and sit, the Quarry Kitchen is right by this. It's in the swimming baths. It's right as you get into the quarry. It's really cool spot. I feel like I should do like a thing because I coffee shops have to have a certain amount of things for me to be able to enjoy them. I need PowerPoints for my laptop, so plug them in. It needs to be good coffee, a good vibe. And there's certain spots that I really, really enjoy in Shrewsbury. So maybe we should do like a coffee shop review or something ridiculous. I don't know, but certainly up there, the Quarry Kitchen, it's right up there with some of the great spots of town. Thank you for today's guests. Make sure you keep an eye out for hydrogeology in your area. And if this is your first time listening to the Shrewsbury Biscuit, it does happen an awful lot. Please give us a follow on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we're on TikTok, also on Threads. So give us a follow on your favorite social media. And also I want to point out that I'm doing this Owl's Fat to Fit thing with Hitsona Shrewsbury, the guys there. Shout out to Tanya, because I'm a bit of a pudding, right? I am kind of really hitting things hard at the moment. I'm doing 2 to 3 hit sessions a week. I'm working hard in my new job. The weight is falling off me, but I've got this new mindset and my frame is stronger. I'm kind of walking and holding myself a bit more firm now since I started this. So if you're interested, go onto our Instagram or our TikTok and keep an eye on the Owl's Fat to Fit. I'm doing it week by week or as and when I can get these videos out. But it's really illustrating sort of what these classes are doing for me. And if you're interested in joining the hit sessions, go to Hitsona Shrewsbury and take a look there and sign up for some taster classes. And I guarantee you're going to notice a difference straight away. So that's what's going on there. Guys, I'm going to leave you to it. This has been a fantastic episode. We've got more to come. Josh Lobley is on the next episode. We're talking about local music. And yeah, I'm glad to be back. 2 episodes in, and I am in my element. It's great. Right, catch you on the next one, guys. Peace out.